Library automation generally means use of information technology, including the communication technology, for library operations. Generally, we use library automation for computerizing the library operations, the housekeeping operations, and information handling. In the housekeeping operations, we use for circulation, acquisition, cataloging, serials control, and other many operations and the services. To discuss the topic, we have two experts in our studios. Professor E. Ramareddy Garu is a university librarian, University of Hyderabad, and Professor L. J. Haravu, a former chief librarian, ICRSAT, Hyderabad. Professor Ramareddy Garu, why we need library automation?
Well, traditionally the libraries have been functioning with manual operated systems where human beings or the professional library staff have been performing duties, day-to-day activities of the library without any kinds of help from the modern technology. But right now the technology is very much ripe, and it has got into the libraries very aggressively, and now the automation, that is the computerization, use of computers in the libraries have become a necessity to automate every activity of the library or every function of the library, so that it can reach to a larger number of users who are far and also very not only near and far, but every section of the society who is involved in library functions or library services.
Thank you, Professor Ramareddy Garu. Professor Haravu, we have different academic libraries at different levels, maybe school, college, university, and even in the university we have the central library and the department libraries. Do all these libraries need same level of automation, or do they want different automation requirements have?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, because when we talk of academic library automation, we have to remember that there are different types of environments even in an academic institutional situation. For instance, you may have a very large university library, and associated with that university library there could be several small college libraries or several small departmental libraries. So when we talk of automation, I think we need to talk of automation not only of a single library, but of a group of libraries which are within the same campus, for instance. In other words, what we are now looking at when we talk of library automation is not just one library, but a network of libraries. For instance, it will be wonderful if a big university like say Osmania University or Hyderabad University or Andhra University could link its resources with smaller college libraries elsewhere in the state. This would be a great help for these small colleges, because they do not have this kind of resources that a big university library has. So when we talk of automation today, we have to look at the different use scenarios that are there within a campus, within a university federated system, so that the benefits of automation can go far and wide beyond the confines of a single library. I think that is the key today when we talk of library automation, and therefore each library will need different kinds of infrastructure, different kinds of software, different kinds of hardware, different kinds of connectivity. So these are some of the issues that are important to be looked at when we talk of automation in academic libraries.
So what sort of infrastructure requirements are generally need for library automation? Professor Haravu.
I'd like to briefly supplement what Professor Dr. Ramareddy mentioned. I think we should not forget that automation of libraries is a very complex task. It requires highly skilled software professionals. It requires highly specialized kind of software itself, and then it requires various types of infrastructure. So there is a tendency in many countries to think that library automation is a very simple affair and that anybody can do this, anybody can develop a library automation software package. This is not correct. Therefore, it's all the more reason why we should depend on another agency or another library or a good software consultancy company which has the experience of building, not only building software, but also implementing it in a particular library and then training the people who are in the library. These are very important issues. Coming now specifically to the question of infrastructure, when we talk of automation, we think only of computers, but computers are only one very small component of any good automation system. There are many other things that are required. For instance, you will need, for instance, a good server, which is also a computer, no doubt. You will need a good server, you will need a good local area network kind of infrastructure. You will require access to external resources. For instance, when you talk of a library catalog, when the cataloging operation is done, it's not that this particular catalog operation is done like in an island unto itself. It has to have access to external resources. Now, these external resources may be in some other country, it could be in another computer somewhere else. And nowadays, when we talk of external resources, invariably we talk of internet. In other words, the internet has become an essential infrastructure so far as library automation is concerned. Not only for accessing external databases, but also for sharing information across different communities, across different libraries. For instance, there may be a remote user who wants to have access to your library. He must have the facility to connect to your computer, to your database, so that he needs access via the internet. So there are many different kinds of infrastructure. One of them is the hardware. Of course, you need software, various kinds of software, operating system software, networking operating software, database management software. Of course, you need an underlying operating system itself, and you need hardware, networking resources like the access to internet, access to an intranet perhaps, a local area network. These I would call as essential infrastructure for a good library automation solution. Whether it is a single library, whether it's a multiple library, whether it's a large library, this is true for all kinds of libraries.
Yeah. Then selection of hardware and software is a very, very crucial thing in planning the library automation. So what are how we select the hardware for the automating these academic libraries?
Okay. Coming to the hardware selection, well, for all operations within the library, I would put it in if it can be prioritized in the sense that all housekeeping operations can be taken as a priority. Then you can create information resources within the library, and you can network, and those kinds of things need a powerful database server and also several nodes within the library. Nodes means the systems which are likely to be or which are going to be installed in different sections for the library staff to operate these systems for database creation or any kind of activities. And to select a server, you need to know you need to decide on certain parameters like the size of the library and the growth, the rate of growth of the library, in addition in terms of adding the reading materials, and also the transactions which takes place, like the number of users it is going to serve and the budget, the amount of budget which is going to be spent on this. And if we can look at these parameters and decide a configuration for a server, configuration of a server, and the server becomes a critical component in all the operations, and for that a database server and some systems in the acquisition, technical processing, serials control, circulation, and even office automation, and some of these areas which need to be installed, and then they are to be networked within the building so that all the operations becomes online. In that particular sense of the term, the database server and the different nodes are to be decided based on the functionalities of the library. And when it comes to configuration, the configuration is such a big word again. In the configuration, we need to decide about this disk space, the RAM itself or the speed of the machine, and also the network interface card, and also the database size of the database which need to be created has to be the main focus for selecting a hardware configuration, and it should be again more emphasis need to be given to a modular approach. Again, the systems need to be upgraded as the technology goes up, and in that kind of a situation, without disturbing the existing hardware, you should be in a position to add on either the hardware, hard disk, or the memory, or any activities without disturbing the existing structure. So that is the reason we have to really look at in selecting the hardware.
Thank you. Then selecting the software, one should be very cautious about the suitability software package for a library, especially the academic library. So what are the criteria generally one should follow for selecting a library software package?
Yeah, following on Dr. Ram Reddy's comments, I think we should remember that there are different types of libraries, different requirements are there. I think the issue that he very correctly mentioned, the issue of scalability. I mean, today you may want to have a particular kind of software or a particular kind of hardware, but within the next 5 years, the whole requirement may change. So you require the capacity to keep on upgrading and upscaling your operations. This is important. And now coming to software, again, you have different types of software. For instance, there are some software which will work only on a single computer system. A small library may be adequate for that small library by a single user system. On the other hand, you have multi-user systems where it can run off a network server on a local area network, and then you are able to connect several users to that network server. So that's a multi-user system. But then you have bigger systems where you have a client server kind of systems where you can connect not just 10 users or 20 users, but even thousands of users, depending on the nature of the particular software that you choose. For instance, if you take a very large library like Library of Congress, at any point of time there will probably be several thousand users directly logged on to the Library of Congress. Similarly, if you take a very large university library, which has study centers all over the country or all over the city or a big city like Delhi or Hyderabad, this kind of library would require a high-end software which will allow several connections to the database of that particular library. So they have to choose probably a web-based, internet-based kind of software which will run from a web server rather than from a local area network server. So these are some of the important considerations that one has to keep in mind when choosing a particular software. Whether today you may run off a local area network, but you must buy or lease a software which allows you to change from a local area network server to a web server. That kind of scalability is very, very, very important when you think of software acquisition or software leasing in library automation.
Yeah. Database creation is the first step in the practical approach to the library automation. So how to start this database creation activity? Professor Ram Reddy garu.
See, in the beginning I mentioned that the library automation is the first step is to create a database of its own, like converting the card catalog into the machine readable catalog, and converting the catalog into machine readable requires the hardware and the software, and apart from that, a decision has to be taken by each and every library that how to create the database. Maybe the library should decide on a particular date, which is which can be a cutoff date, and from that day onwards, whatever the new books come into the library can directly get into the database, and the books or the records which are already there in the library, which can be taken as a retrospective conversion of data, and for that you can take it as a separate project and then start creating the database as simultaneously along with the current records. For this purpose, what a particular decision need to be taken is to create a database or data sheet. And if you create a data sheet with various fields, and then these data sheets can be taken to the library stack area and then start creating the data sheets, and then those data sheets can be checked properly before a data entry takes place. And even after taking the inputting data or data entry is taking place, there should be a mechanism where people need to check the data and then put it into the system for use, so that your retrieval becomes very efficient and your database becomes error-free data, and which is very critical for database creation. And it is absolutely necessary for that way of doing this.
Yeah. Generally, standard means generally we mean quality. Here in the standard means also compatibility. So suppose one library wants to exchange data with another library. So there is a need for the standards. Professor Arora, what is the importance of standards in the database creation and development?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I think the most important resource in an automated library system is its catalog. And we should not forget that when you think of computerization or library automation, we should not think of the catalog or a database as simply an electronic equivalent of the card catalog. The database has to be really much more, there must be much more value addition to the library's catalog records. Then only the whole purpose of using the computer is fully satisfied and fully served. Now, Professor Ram Reddy mentioned that one has to take a lot of pains to ensure that the quality of the catalog is good. Now, one way of getting good quality of the catalog is to use an authoritative cataloging resource. Now, for instance, if you take the Western world, the amount of primary cataloging that they do is probably only 15% or 10% of their total collection. 85 to 90% of the catalog records are taken from an authoritative source. Now, what do we mean by an authoritative source? An authoritative source is usually the national library of the country. For instance, in the United Kingdom, it will be the British Library. In the United States of America, it will be the Library of Congress. Now, these agencies are cataloging thousands of books every year, and they use very high standards in their cataloging. For instance, the current standard, which is worldwide in use, is the MARC standard, or the machine readable catalog standard. Now, this is a standard which is so widely accepted all over the world, right from the Western countries to the East European countries, as well as Southeast and Southeast Asian countries, that it is advantageous for libraries to choose a standard which is global, which is international. Let us not forget that we are today living in a globalized society. We are living in a world which is really global. We cannot afford to ignore global standards. If at all we do that, we will be doing it at our own risk. That means if we don't use international standards, we will not be able to contribute our catalog records to an international source, and we will not be able to take records from an international source because our standards are not similar to theirs. Therefore, I think it's very, very important when we think of automation of a library, particularly academic libraries like universities, for instance, that we should apply international standards. And when we say international standards today, we are talking of standards like the MARC 21, like the ISO 2709 standards, like the Z39.50 standards. These are standards which have been developed, which have been built essentially to see that there is good exchange of data, good exchange of information, good access to information, and so on. So, these are standards which one has to consciously look for when considering automation of particularly academic libraries. Lastly, I would like to also mention that when a huge university, let's say like Osmania University or Hyderabad University or Delhi University is automating its library, they should not forget that their resource is a very valuable resource, and the collection, the description of that collection should be so good, should be so complete, should be so consistent that it should be a model for others to follow. Many smaller libraries may simply download the information from, say, Osmania University or Hyderabad University. They don't have to unnecessarily reinvent the wheel by cataloging the same document again and again. So they need to have the capacity to download. These are some of the issues that one has to look at, and I think the only way of ensuring all this is through good application of international standards. One big problem in our country, I think, is that we have very poor appreciation of these international standards. All of us follow our own standards, and I think this is something that is counterproductive. We should change this, and we should look towards really having international global standards in whatever we do, particularly in the library automation field.
Besides library automation of housekeeping operations and information handling, we also talking about networking. A computer network, basically, a computer network is an interconnected collection of autonomous computers and peripheral devices, that is network components, that allows the network components to work together. And the benefits of this computer network, we can say, it allows users to share hardware, allows information to be shared, allows the electronic transfer of text, allows the decentralization of various data processing functions, allows communication between organizations, allows access to remote databases. What are the other benefits for the library networks, Professor Rao?
Yeah, it's a good question. See, I think we are no longer islands unto ourselves. It's impossible for any library to have everything that is useful to its clients under its own collection. Today, the emphasis is not from collection building, but towards access provision, provision of access. Because there is so much information available today that it's impossible for me to collect everything under one roof. I need to have the capacity to provide access to information, irrespective of whether it is in my library, whether it is in another library in my city, or whether it is in some other library somewhere else in the world. Access is the key today, not collection building. Now, if access is the key, then we need to be highly network conscious. We need to be highly network effective. Now, what do we mean by an effective network? An effective network means a network that allows exchange of data, seamless exchange of data. That means I must be able to take data from some other computer somewhere else in the world completely freely and use it for my own library or for my users in my library. That is one aspect of it. The other is I must be able to take data from another center and incorporate that into my database. For instance, supposing I am cataloging, let us say, 5,000 books every year. I don't have to unnecessarily reinvent the wheel by cataloging all the books which are already been cataloged by some other library. So, I must be able to download cataloging data into my collection. Third definition of an effective network is people who need information must have access to very easy and friendly access to your collection. How do they do that? That can only be done if your databases are available on the internet. People can connect to the internet and then again connect to your library's catalog, download information, look at this thing, search your catalog, search other catalogs. So that's another aspect of effective networking.
What are the general networking components required for academic library networking?
Okay. See, when we are talking about the networking, we are talking in terms of connecting computers. To connect computers, you require different components. The first one, which is a cable itself, a data cable, which can be connecting the server with the nodes, and another very important component which is required is the switches. The switches play a kind of a junction box from one server connecting various computers. And also to backup, the network requires a kind of a backup of power, so that even in the eventualities, the online systems are not going to be disturbed if the UPS connectivity is not provided to the switches, and which is very much necessary, so that online transactions takes place. And another very important component in the network is the fiber terminating points, where you have the fiber backbone on which the servers are connected, and the server in turn is connected with the different systems. Take for instance in a university, where a campus-wide local area network, once it is created, where several computers, they may have small local area networks within the schools or within the departments, and in turn all these are connected on the backbone of the campus network. And the backbone is a major component in the network, and using small networks, smaller local area networks, they become a campus-wide local area network, whereby the sharing of resources becomes much more meaningful. And in a networking, another point I just want to supplement what Professor Haru has mentioned. In a network, what we are actually doing is we are also sharing the hardware components, and we are also sharing the resources which are scattered in a distributed database model, and also we are giving access to the users directly at their desktops, and thereby the libraries now have to focus acquisition to access. That is the latest trend, which is to be understood very clearly. Is traditionally the libraries have been acquiring and processing and owning them, but that's no longer possible. In a network situation, the database is going to be sitting in different places, and it's only the network which is going to make it accessibility much more easier for the users at their desktops, and that is what is required for in the networking aspect of a library.
We thank them, Professor Rao, Professor Ramreddy. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
ఈ మన ఉన్నత విద్యా కార్యక్రమాలపై మీ సందేహాలు, సలహాలు, సూచనలు పంపవలసిన చిరునామా: డైరెక్టర్, ఆడియో విజువల్ ప్రొడక్షన్ అండ్ రీసెర్చ్ సెంటర్, డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ ఓపెన్ యూనివర్సిటీ, ప్రొఫెసర్ జి రామిరెడ్డి మార్గ్, రోడ్ నంబర్ 46, జూబ్లీ హిల్స్, హైదరాబాద్ 500033.